What if I told you there were racing modifications so devastatingly effective, so absolutely dominant, that racing officials didn't just ban them, they made them illegal to even possess at the track? These 5 modifications didn't just bend the rules, they shattered them completely. And today, getting caught with one could end your racing career forever. Stick around because number 2 will absolutely blow your mind. It made cars so fast that drivers were pulling 6 Gs in the corners. And wait until you hear what happened to the team that tried to sneak number 1 past tech inspection in 1987. What's up, speed demons? Welcome back to Car Cruiser. I'm your host, and today we're diving into the dark side of motorsports to uncover 5 modifications that were so effective, so game-changing, that racing organizations around the world had to make them illegal just to keep competition alive. We're talking about innovations that gave teams 200+ horsepower advantages, aerodynamic tricks that created downforce levels that defied physics, and suspension secrets that made cars corner like they were on rails. Some were banned by NASCAR, others got teams kicked out of Formula One, and one was so dangerous it nearly killed the sport entirely. Before we expose these forbidden technologies, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming up on this channel. We've got some incredible banned technology stories and racing scandals that'll leave you speechless. Now, I've spent the last 15 years working with racing teams, and I've seen firsthand how these modifications worked. I've talked to the engineers who designed them, the drivers who used them, and the officials who had to ban them. What you're about to hear isn't speculation. These are the real stories from the people who lived through racing's most controversial era. Starting our countdown at number 5, the Lotus ground effect side skirts that turned Formula One cars into literal vacuum cleaners on wheels. This isn't just about aerodynamics. This is about Colin Chapman's team discovering a loophole in physics that made their cars so fast, other teams accused them of cheating with black magic. Picture this: 1977 Formula One season. Mario Andretti shows up to practice in the Lotus 78, and something's different. This car isn't just fast, it's defying the laws of physics. While other teams are struggling with tire grip and cornering speeds, the Lotus is taking corners at speeds that should send it flying into the barriers. The secret? Ground effect side skirts that created a venturi tunnel underneath the car. As air rushed under the car, it accelerated through the narrowing channel, creating massive low pressure that literally sucked the car to the track. We're talking about 1,500 pounds of downforce at 150 miles per hour, more than the car weighed. But here's what made it truly revolutionary. Traditional wings create downforce but also drag. The Lotus system created downforce with almost no drag penalty. It was like having the grip of a Can-Am car with the straight-line speed of an Indy car. I talked to a former Lotus engineer last year who worked on the original system. He told me, "We knew we had something special when Mario came back from his first test session, white as a sheet. He said the car was pulling 4 Gs in corners where he used to pull 2. It was like driving a different sport entirely." The 1978 season was a massacre. Lotus won 7 out of 16 races, with Mario Andretti taking the championship. But other teams weren't sitting still. They were reverse engineering the system and improving on it. By 1979, ground effect had evolved into something terrifying. Cars were generating so much downforce that drivers were experiencing G-forces that fighter pilots would find challenging. Riccardo Patrese crashed at Monza pulling over 5 Gs. The car literally stuck to the track so hard that when the skirts failed, it launched into the air like a rocket. The FIA panicked. These weren't race cars anymore. They were ground effect missiles with drivers strapped to them. In 1981, they banned movable skirts entirely. Teams tried to cheat with flexible skirts, brush seals, even magnetic systems. But officials cracked down hard. Today, if you show up to any major racing series with ground effect skirts, you're not just disqualified, you're banned from competition. The technology was so effective that it's still illegal in Formula One, NASCAR, IndyCar, and virtually every other major series. The Lotus skirts prove that sometimes innovation moves faster than safety, and when that happens, the rulebook has to catch up fast. Number 4 takes us into the world of electronic wizardry with McLaren's brake steer system, a modification so sophisticated, so devastatingly effective, that when other teams finally figured out what McLaren was doing, they demanded it be banned immediately. This is the story of how McLaren turned their 1997 MP 4/12 into a corner-carving monster that could outbrake and outturn anything on the grid, and they did it with a system so secret that even their own drivers didn't fully understand how it worked. Here's what was happening. While other teams were fighting understeer and oversteer through corners, McLaren drivers were hitting the brakes and watching their cars rotate perfectly through every turn. David Coulthard and Mika Hakkinen were braking later, turning sharper and accelerating earlier than physics should have allowed. The secret was a third brake pedal hidden in the cockpit. When the driver pressed it with his left foot, it applied the rear brakes independently, creating controlled oversteer that helped the car rotate through corners. But that's not the illegal part. That was just clever engineering. The illegal part was the computer system that automatically modulated the brake steer based on steering input, speed, and cornering forces. The car was essentially driving itself through corners, while the driver just pointed it in the right direction. I spoke with a former McLaren engineer who worked on the system. He told me, "We called it the magic pedal." Drivers would come back from testing sessions saying the car felt like it was reading their minds. They'd think about turning, and the car would already be rotating. The system was so effective that McLaren dominated the 1998 season, winning the Constructors' Championship by a massive margin. But other teams were getting suspicious. Ferrari's engineers noticed that McLaren cars were leaving different tire marks through corners. The rear tires were showing signs of controlled sliding that shouldn't have been possible with normal braking. The investigation that followed was like something out of a spy movie. FIA officials demanded to inspect McLaren's brake system, but the team had built the electronics so deep into the car systems that it took weeks to find the illegal components. When they finally discovered the brake steer system, the reaction was explosive. Ron Dennis, McLaren's team principal, was hauled before the FIA court and fined $100 million, the largest penalty in Formula One history at that time. But here's the crazy part. The technology was so advanced that it took other teams 3 years to develop their own versions. By then, the FIA had banned any form of driver assistance, making brake steer systems illegal in all forms of motorsport. Today, if you're caught with any form of automated brake steer system, you're not just disqualified, you're facing criminal charges for fraud. The technology that McLaren developed in 1997 was so far ahead of its time that modern Formula One cars still don't have systems that sophisticated. The brake steer scandal proved that in racing, the line between innovation and cheating is often thinner than the carbon fiber on a Formula One chassis. Number 3 is where things get absolutely insane. The Chapperel 2J Sucker Car, a modification so radical, so completely outside the box, that when Jim Hall showed up with it in 1970, other teams accused him of bringing a spaceship to a car race. This isn't just about aerodynamics or engine modifications. This is about an American engineer who looked at the laws of physics and said, "I can do better than that." Picture this: 1970 Can-Am season at Watkins Glen. The usual suspects are there: McLaren, Ferrari, Porsche, all with their traditional race cars. Then Jim Hall rolls out of the Chapperel garage with something that looks like it escaped from a NASA wind tunnel. The 2J had 2 massive fans mounted at the rear, powered by a separate snowmobile engine. These fans sucked air from underneath the car through flexible skirts that sealed the bottom to the track. The result? Constant speed-independent downforce that made the car stick to the track like it was magnetized. While other cars lost downforce at low speeds, the 2J generated maximum downforce sitting still in the pits. It could corner at 2.5 Gs when other cars were struggling to hit 1.8 Gs. The physics were so extreme that drivers reported feeling like they were driving upside down. I interviewed Jackie Stewart about the 2J a few years ago. He told me, that car was terrifying to race against. It would brake 50 feet later than anything else, take corners at impossible speeds, and accelerate out like it had twice the horsepower. It wasn't racing. It was a demonstration of superior technology. But here's what made it truly revolutionary. The fans created consistent downforce regardless of the car's attitude. If the car got sideways, lost a wing, or had aerodynamic damage, the sucker system kept working. It was like having a safety net made of physics. The first time Vic Elford drove the 2J in practice, he came back to the pits shaking. "The car pulled 3 Gs through the chicane," he reported. "I've never experienced anything like it. It felt like the track was pulling the car down." But the other teams weren't just impressed, they were furious. McLaren's Denny Hume called it an unfair advantage that has nothing to do with driving skill. Ferrari threatened to boycott Can-Am if the car wasn't banned. The politics got ugly fast. Teams argued that the fans were movable aerodynamic devices, which were illegal. Chapperel countered that they were cooling fans for the transmission. The technical arguments went on for months while the 2J dominated every race it finished. Then came the reliability issues. The snowmobile engine that powered the fans was never designed for racing conditions. It would overheat, seize, or simply explode under the stress of generating constant downforce. The 2J won races when it finished, but it finished less than half the time. By 1971, the SCCA had seen enough. They banned any form of fan-assisted aerodynamics, effectively killing the sucker car concept. Jim Hall was devastated. He'd spent 2 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars developing technology that was banned after 1 season. But the story doesn't end there. The technology was so advanced that Gordon Murray used similar principles when designing the McLaren F1 road car in the 1990s. The fan-assisted ground effect system in the F1 was directly inspired by Hall's work on the 2J. Today, fan-assisted downforce is banned in every major racing series worldwide. The technology is considered so effective that even possessing the technical drawings can get you banned from competition. The Chapperel 2J proved that sometimes being too innovative is just as dangerous as not being innovative enough. Number 2 will absolutely blow your mind. Toyota's turbo restrictor bypass system in the 1995 World Rally Championship. A modification so sophisticated, so perfectly hidden, that it took the FIA 3 years to discover how Toyota was making 100 extra horsepower appear and disappear at will. This is the story of automotive espionage, engineering genius, and the most expensive cheating scandal in motorsports history. Here's what was happening. 1995 WRC season, and Toyota's Celica GT4 is dominating everything. Didier Auriol and Carlos Sainz are winning rallies by margins that don't make sense. Their cars are pulling away from identical Subarus and Mitsubishis on the straights like they have 50% more power. But here's the thing. All WRC cars used identical turbo restrictors to limit power. These restrictors were sealed by FIA officials and checked after every rally. Toyota's restrictors always passed inspection, yet their cars were clearly making more power than anyone else. The secret was a restrictor plate that could change its internal diameter by 1 millimeter. Just 1 millimeter. But that tiny change increased airflow by 25%, adding nearly 100 horsepower. The system was activated by a specific sequence of gear changes that only the drivers knew. I talked to a former Toyota engineer who worked on the system. He told me, "We spent 2 years developing a restrictor that could pass any inspection but still give us the power we needed to win." The engineering was more complex than the engine itself. The restrictor used a spring-loaded sleeve that would compress under specific conditions, opening up the airflow. During normal inspection, the sleeve was extended, making the restrictor appear legal. But during competition, the drivers could activate the system with a secret sequence. 4th gear, full throttle, lift, back to full throttle. The sleeve would compress, and suddenly they had 350 horsepower instead of 250. The system was so sophisticated that it included fail-safes. If the car was involved in an accident or the engine was shut down unexpectedly, the sleeve would automatically extend, hiding the cheat. Even if officials pulled the restrictor immediately after a stage, it would appear completely legal. For 3 years, Toyota dominated the WRC with this system. They won the Manufacturers' Championship in 1993 and 1994, and were leading in 1995 when everything fell apart. The discovery happened by accident. During the 1995 Rally Catalunya, Carlos Sainz's Celica suffered engine failure on a stage. When FIA officials arrived to inspect the wreckage, They found the restrictor in its compressed position. The spring mechanism had failed when the engine seized. The investigation that followed was like something out of a thriller movie. FIA officials discovered that Toyota had been using the illegal restrictor system for 3 years, winning dozens of rallies and 2 world championships with what was essentially a remote-controlled turbo system. The penalties were devastating. Toyota was banned from the WRC for 1 year, fined $100,000, and stripped of all their 1995 results. Team principal Ove Andersson was banned from motorsport for 5 years. The scandal nearly killed Toyota's rally program entirely. But here's the most incredible part. The engineering was so advanced that other manufacturers couldn't figure out how it worked even after the FIA explained it. The spring-loaded sleeve system required precision manufacturing tolerances that were beyond what most teams could achieve. I spoke with a Subaru engineer who tried to reverse engineer the Toyota system. He told me, "We knew they were cheating, but we couldn't figure out how." Even after the FIA showed us the restrictor, it took us 6 months to understand the engineering. It was brilliant and completely illegal. Today, turbo restrictors in motorsport are not just sealed, they're electronically monitored in real time. Any change in airflow triggers immediate disqualification. The technology Toyota developed is now used by security agencies to detect tampering with sealed systems. The Toyota restrictor scandal proved that in modern motorsport, the most dangerous cheats aren't the obvious ones. They're the ones that are too sophisticated to detect. And number 1, the modification that was so devastating, so completely game-changing, that when NASCAR finally discovered it, they didn't just ban the technology, they made possession of nitrous oxide at any NASCAR facility a federal crime. This is the story of how a few rogue teams nearly destroyed the integrity of stock car racing with a power adder that was completely invisible to tech inspection. Picture this: 1987 NASCAR season, and something strange is happening. Certain cars that qualify in the middle of the pack are suddenly finding 50-plus horsepower on race day. They're passing cars on the straights that should be faster, pulling away from identical engines like they're running in a different class. The teams doing it were smart. They weren't winning every race, just enough to make serious money without attracting too much attention. But other teams were getting suspicious. How do you find 50 horsepower in a sealed NASCAR engine that's been through tech inspection? The secret was a nitrous oxide injection system so sophisticated, so perfectly hidden, that it took NASCAR officials 2 years to figure out how teams were cheating. The system was built into the car's roll cage itself. Hollow tubes that appeared to be structural safety equipment were actually nitrous storage tanks. I talked to a former NASCAR official who was part of the investigation. He told me, "We knew something was wrong when lap times didn't match qualifying speeds. Cars that should have been running 28.5-second laps were suddenly running 28.1 seconds in race conditions. That's a massive difference in NASCAR." The injection system was activated by a hidden switch disguised as a radio button. When drivers pressed it, nitrous was injected directly into the intake manifold through lines hidden in the wiring harness. The beauty of the system was that it left no trace. Nitrous oxide burns completely clean, leaving no residue that tech inspectors could detect. But here's what made it truly diabolical. The teams using it had developed a communication system with their spotters. When NASCAR officials were watching their car, the spotter would radio "clear track ahead," code for "don't use the system." When officials looked away, traffic coming meant "hit the button." The system gave cars an instant 75 to 100 horsepower boost that lasted about 30 seconds per shot. Teams would save it for crucial moments, passing the leader, defending position, or making a late race charge. To spectators and TV cameras, it just looked like great driving and perfect timing. The breakthrough in the investigation came during the 1987 Talladega race. Dale Earnhardt's crew chief noticed that certain cars were leaving different exhaust signatures during passes, a slight change in the exhaust note that suggested extra fuel was being burned. He reported it to NASCAR officials, who started paying closer attention. The smoking gun came when officials noticed that some cars were making pit stops for radio problems that lasted exactly long enough to refill a nitrous tank. When they started checking the cars more carefully, they found the hollow roll cage tubes and the hidden injection lines. The scandal that followed nearly destroyed NASCAR's credibility. 7 teams were found to be using nitrous systems, including some of the sport's biggest names. The penalties were unprecedented. Lifetime bans for crew chiefs, massive fines, and forfeiture of all prize money from races where the system was used. But the real damage was to the sport's reputation. Fans felt betrayed, sponsors questioned the integrity of competition, and TV ratings dropped as people wondered if what they were watching was real racing or just elaborate cheating. NASCAR's response was swift and brutal. They made possession of nitrous oxide at any NASCAR facility a federal crime, punishable by up to 5 years in prison. They installed nitrous detection equipment at every track and started random testing of fuel samples for nitrous residue. I spoke with a former crew chief who was caught in the scandal. He told me, "We thought we were being clever, gaining a competitive edge. We didn't realize we were destroying the sport we loved. The technology was incredible, but using it was the biggest mistake of my career." Today, NASCAR's anti-nitrous measures are so sophisticated that they can detect nitrous residue in parts per million concentrations. Teams are subject to random searches, and any component that could potentially hide nitrous is X-rayed and chemically tested. The nitrous scandal taught NASCAR that in the modern era, cheating isn't just about bending rules. It's about preserving the integrity of competition itself. Some technologies are simply too powerful to exist in racing. So there you have it, Speed Demons. 5 modifications that were so effective, so devastatingly dominant, that racing organizations had to make them illegal just to preserve competition. From Lotus's ground effect revolution to NASCAR's nitrous nightmare, these technologies represent the absolute cutting edge of automotive innovation and the dark side of competitive racing. What's incredible is that most of these modifications were developed by engineers who genuinely believed they were advancing the sport. They didn't set out to cheat, they set out to win, and sometimes winning requires pushing boundaries that shouldn't be pushed. These stories prove that in motorsport, the line between innovation and cheating is often determined by whoever writes the rulebook. Today's illegal modification might be tomorrow's standard technology, or it might be banned forever because it's simply too dangerous to exist. Which modification shocked you the most? I'm betting most of you had no idea about that Toyota Restrictor system. It's the ultimate example of how sophisticated modern cheating has become. Drop a comment below and let me know which one you think was the most ingenious and which one deserved to be banned. And if you're as obsessed with racing's dark secrets as I am, you absolutely need to check out this video about the most expensive racing scandals in motorsport history. We found evidence of a Formula One team that spent $50 million developing a system that was used for exactly one race before being banned forever. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We've got more forbidden racing technology stories coming your way, including the story of the most dangerous car ever built and why the FIA tried to have every example destroyed. Until next time, keep those engines running, and remember, in racing, sometimes the most impressive technology is the stuff you're not allowed to use. These modifications prove that human ingenuity will always find a way to go faster, even when the rules say you can't.